What's going on, YouTube? This is SG1 Sports, and you're watching our college football channel. Yesterday, I gave you the projected standings for the SEC. Now we're going to go to the Big Ten. This is based off of the projected records and schedule previews that we did back really a couple of months ago, and never got around to doing the full standings. Now, I didn't do every Big Ten team, so some of these projections you're going to see for the first time. And I feel a little bit different about some of these teams than I did when I did those projections. So again, this is not a prediction. My prediction will not look exactly like this. It might be kind of close, but we simply just did a kind of a conservative approach here, looking at how the teams finished last year, what their record was last year, what they lost, what they had coming back, and just what most people around the country think about these teams, and then put that up against the schedule to get a projection. So let's just take a look at the projection. And we'll start with the Big Ten East. Rutgers and Michigan State down there tied at the bottom. Both teams projected to go 3-6. 6-6 for Rutgers, 5-7 overall for Michigan State, losing a non-conference game in there, probably to Miami. And again, when we did the projection, we simply went with the overall record. I had to just kind of do some math to make the conference records match, because we have to have, the wins and losses have to match. So you could really maybe, for some teams, bump the conference record up or down a game if you change the outcome to one of those non-conference games. But for the most part, I think it worked out pretty well in the Big Ten. And again, Rutgers, Michigan State, both teams finishing 3-6. That's the projection. And again, I said this in the SEC video, this overall record is really kind of a measuring stick, where if a team does better than this record, I think they've had a good season. If they do worse than this record, I think they've had a bad season. Now, Rutgers at 6-6, I think that would actually be a pretty good year for them. And Michigan State, you could argue at 5-7, that would be a bad year, missing out on a bowl game. So maybe it doesn't work out for every team, but I think it's a pretty good measuring stick, like I said. Let's go now to the rest of the conference, rest of the division, I should say. Maryland and Michigan come in tied at number 4. Both teams finishing 4-5 in the conference. 6-6 overall for Maryland, 7-5 for Michigan. The reason I put Maryland on top is simply because they have home field advantage versus Michigan. This projection would have Michigan beating Washington. Again, that's how I had to do it to make the records work out. But if they were to say lose to Washington, then you could maybe see them at 5-4 in the Big Ten, and they would be ahead of Maryland here. So again, you could change that around a little bit, change the overall, change the conference record, and you could get a little bit of a different result. But 7-5 is the projection for Michigan's overall record. I think that's a pretty fair projection. Over 7-5 is a pretty good year. Under 7-5 is a pretty bad year. For Maryland, 6-6, getting to a bowl game, I think that would be a pretty solid year for them. But if they can do better than that, it'll be a good year. Let's go to number 3 now. Penn State. Penn State at 5-4 in the Big Ten, 8-4 overall. And this is just like with Michigan. So we have them beating Auburn in the non-conference with this projection. That's how we had to do it to make the numbers work out. If you change that to a loss, then all of a sudden you got Penn State at 6-3 in the conference. And if they go 8-4, I think they probably lose to Auburn. I don't really see this team losing 4 games in the Big Ten this year. I mean, they could. There are games on the schedule. You got Wisconsin, Ohio State, Indiana. I mean, there are some tough matchups. Iowa, I think they played them on the road. So it could happen. But I think this team's going to be good enough to where they can get to 6-3 in the Big Ten. And again, that's where this projection is different from a prediction. A projection is based off of a number of different factors, not just my personal opinion. The prediction that we'll give you, again, starting the day after Memorial Day, that's when we're going to start our first team. That's going to be simply my prediction, my thoughts on each team. We'll go through and do all the teams like we always do. And that's coming up the day after Memorial Day. But Penn State at 8-4 overall. Indiana comes in at number 2, also 8-4 overall, but 6-3 in the conference, so a little bit better conference record. We're going to put them losing their non-conference game to Cincinnati. Again, you could switch this up. Bump Penn State up to 6-3, drop Indiana down to 5-4. Let's say Indiana beats Cincinnati, Penn State loses to Auburn. That could change the standings around. So that's why I say really we're just looking at this overall record and then just kind of filling in the conference record for whatever makes it work out. But you could easily flip those around. If you think there's a better chance of Penn State losing to Auburn or a better chance of Indiana losing to Cincinnati, but to make the overall records work, you're going to have to go with 6-3 and 5-4, or flip them, or go Penn State 6-3, Indiana 5-4. But those overall records for those two teams would be 8-4. And then, of course, the number 1, we've got Ohio State, 11-1 overall, 8-1 in the conference. When we did the projections, we averaged out all the games. We gave them the wins and the losses. That's if you don't know exactly how the projection process works, just go back and watch any of those videos. Watch our Ohio State schedule preview, projected record, Indiana, Penn State. We did most of the Big Ten. Go back and watch those videos, and you'll get more insight on how exactly we came about these projections. But like I said, my feelings have changed some on some of these teams since I did those projections. I feel better about Rutgers than I did a few months ago. I think Rutgers is going to be a pretty good team. Michigan, maybe I don't feel quite as good about. Maybe Michigan's kind of tough. It's tough to figure out Michigan. But I think overall, this division, I haven't changed my thoughts a whole lot. I think Penn State might be the second best team. I do think it's between Penn State and Indiana, but we'll figure that all out before we do our predictions here coming up very soon. Let's go to the West now. At the bottom, we've got Illinois. Brett Bielema taking over. That says 2-8. It should say 2-7. That was just a typo by me. I apologize. But 2-7 for Illinois in the conference, 4-8 overall. So that's the projection here for Illinois. And it's kind of tough to figure out what we're going to see from Illinois with Brett Bielema taking over. What is this team really going to look like? They're going to be changing, I'm sure, to go more of that power run type offense. It'll be really interesting, but we wouldn't have them losing a non-conference game to Virginia. I think Virginia is a better team than Illinois, and when we make these numbers work out, it would give them a non-conference loss there. But like I said, that was just a typo on me. 2-7 for Illinois, 4-8 overall. I apologize for that. Let's go to Purdue now. 3-6 in the Big Ten, 5-7 overall. They have a tough non-conference game against Notre Dame. That is really possibly going to be what keeps them out of a bowl game. They also play Oregon State, so the projection would have them splitting those games. I think most people would probably figure that you would lose to Notre Dame and beat Purdue, or beat Oregon State, I should say. But 3-6 in the conference. They're going to have to do a little bit better than that. Let's say they do lose to Notre Dame. They're going to have to go 4-5 in the conference to get to a bowl game. Could be another rough year for Purdue this year. Tied here, number 4, we got Minnesota and Nebraska. Both teams going 4-5. Both teams 6-6 overall. Of course, Nebraska has that tough non-conference game against Oklahoma. That'll be a very tough one. And then Minnesota, they play on the road at Colorado. Not necessarily thinking that Colorado's a better team. I think that's a pretty close matchup there. But like I said, when we had to do the math here to make it work out, we had to put Minnesota at 4-5 in the conference. If let's say that we had them beating Colorado and again going 6-6, that would mean you'd have to put them at 3-6 in the conference, and then you'd have to bump another team up. And I don't know which team that would be, but 6-6 the overall record for both Minnesota and Nebraska, and we're going with 4-5 in the conference. Moving on to Northwestern, they finished 5-4 in the conference, 8-4 overall. This is a team that won this division last year, and they have a really favorable schedule. And they had, if you go back and watch our top 10 schedules, toughest schedules and the top 10 easiest schedules, they had the number one, I believe they had the number one easiest schedule in the Power 5. So they have a really easy schedule, and because of that, they could wind up finishing up here near the top of the Big Ten, even if they're maybe not the best, one of the top 3 teams in the Big Ten West, just because of that schedule. And then we have a tie at number 1, Wisconsin and Iowa, both going 6-3 because Wisconsin has home field advantage. We put them there at that number 1 spot. Both teams 8-4 overall. They have, Wisconsin has a pretty tough non-conference schedule. Iowa has to play Iowa State. Wisconsin has Notre Dame. So 2 tough matchups there. And with our projection, both teams would be losing those non-conference games, those big games. But I'll tell you what, the Big Ten West especially, I've kind of changed my thoughts on some of these teams a good bit just from a couple of months ago, just as I really evaluate these rosters more and more. Wisconsin, I still feel about the same. And again, that doesn't mean I think they're going to go 8-4. This projection is not my prediction, but just my feelings about these teams. Iowa, I don't feel quite as good about. Northwestern, I don't feel as good about. Minnesota and Nebraska, I feel a little bit better about. So when it comes down to my predictions, you might see Minnesota or Nebraska at number 2 in this conference. Or maybe even at number 1. Maybe I don't have Wisconsin winning it. We're a while away, and I haven't made my official predictions. Even privately, I haven't made my predictions just yet. I've kind of bounced around some ideas for these teams, but I do feel better about Minnesota and Nebraska than I did a couple of months ago. Iowa and Northwestern, I don't feel quite as good about. Wisconsin, though, to me, especially with the way their schedule sets up, I think they are probably the front runner in this division, and obviously Ohio State's the front runner in the Big Ten East. But it's going to be interesting. It's going to be very interesting to see this division. I think it's pretty wide open. Yes, Wisconsin, Iowa, those seem to be the teams that everyone's favoring, but I think it's a little bit more wide open than that. I could see Minnesota or Nebraska sneaking up there near the top. Not really sure what we're going to get from Northwestern. They lost a ton of production. That's a team that's going to be maybe dropping off a good bit this year. We'll have to wait and see. But those are the projections. Again, not predictions, just projections based off of those factors we talked about. Our predictions will be coming very soon, but I'd love to know your thoughts on the Big Ten. You don't have to give me your official predictions, but just how would you project these divisions to wind up? How would what do you agree with or disagree with here in our projections? Give me your thoughts down in the comments below. Thank you for watching this video, and stay tuned for more here on the SG1 Sports YouTube channel.